All right. Welcome to this episode of the Classic Land Cruisers podcast. Uh, with me today is actually somebody that I've been wanting to talk to for a while. And a number of you have actually said, hey, you need to reach out to Dave Gore of 4 Plus Products, get him on the podcast. And so now it's actually finally happening. So, Dave, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more and how you got into Classic Land Cruisers?
I bought my first Land Cruiser 6 months out of high school. Went down to Big Two Olds Toyota, bought it brand new off the lot. I graduated in 77, May of 77, and then in January of 78, I hit the Toyota dealer, bought an FJ40. At the recommendation of a friend of mine who had a couple FJ40s, Hank Bonney, his son runs Rob Bonney Fab, and Rob was my first employee in 1990, and now he runs his own shop down in Phoenix. Great fabricator, very high end stuff. You know, everything's custom for him. He got tired of doing the same part over and over, so he went out and he decided he was going to do the custom stuff. And um, he and he and Tracy Jordan went together in the rock crawling. I went with Don Robbins in the late 90s. We started, I think, 98. Um, and then Tracy went on to become legendary. He's still in it. You know, we were running with the Shannon Campbells and in that batch and a whole bunch of the early people. But I
Yeah.
started really wanting to get into the off-road market as a photographer. My job in the 80s, I ran a Photoshop, custom Photoshop, and I did photography. So I was doing HDRA and score events. So I was sitting
Okay.
in trailers eating donuts and coffee with Ivan Stewart and Walker Evans and Rod Hall and the Archero brothers and all the 80s, racers.
Yeah.
Um, and It was weird because late in the rock crawling, I hadn't seen Walker Evans in, I don't know, 15 years. And one day he shows up at the Phoenix event, right stuck between Don and I and Tracy and Rob, because that was his first event and he was trying to get pointers on how to do rock crawling. Except he had a lot more money than us. So our trucks are kind of beat up 40s, and his truck was pretty nice. What money could
Yeah.
buy. And I think in 89, I approached Rob, who was 14 at the time, and said, "Do you want to work at McDonald's or do you want to build Land Cruiser parts?" Because there was nothing out there for Toyotas. I mean, you had Hickey and Confer, pretty basic stuff.
Yeah.
Because I'd already bought all that stuff for my 40. I'd bought a Confer roof rack, the Confer 8274 bumper, Confer shackles. Um, I can't remember. I went through a few brands of springs. One of them was pretty atrocious. That was from from California, and they went out of business. It had a 3-leaf pack, and each leaf was almost a half-inch thick. It was Burbank Spring is who made that one,
Oh
and
man.
they were so rough they tore the hangers off the back of my truck. I mean, so I traded them for some back for stock springs until it was a while before ARB came out. I think I went to
Yeah.
Ranchos at that point, but we built a pretty. My first 40, I built that pretty one-off custom because I had to do the tracks and I had to go along with the racers. So I built that more as a pre-runner. My 40, it was caged from front to back, engine cage. I could cruise across the desert with the dirt bikes. It was a fun truck, but I was younger then. I don't do that
Yeah.
anymore. Yeah. And then in 1990, I approached Al at Manafray, Marv at Spectre, um, and then also Downey. But Al's the only one that responded. Um, I'm not a lawyer up kind of guy.
Yeah.
Spectre sent me papers to sign, legal agreements and stuff like that. And I said, I don't want to do that. But Al just called me and said, hey, give me 5 of those and 5 of those. And that started a long 20-year relationship with Manfrey where I was just doing all their work for them. They got so busy, it's so all I could do. I had to quit doing a lot of the custom stuff because in the beginning you're doing Jeep cages and Bronco cages and Jimmy cages and Blazer cages, anything and everything. But pretty much by the end of the 90s, there was enough Land Cruiser business going. It was harder to do back then because everything was paper catalogs, and
Yeah.
they didn't have a web presence at that time. And he would build a catalog, and to run a set of catalogs like he was running was 80 to 100,000 for the year.
Yeah.
And by the time he got the catalog published, I already had 10 new products. We had at the end of the 90s, I had 125 things I was building for him between the 60s and just 60s and 40s, and a little bit of 80. We did a lift kit for the 80 for a while, um, but it didn't sell that well because the 80s were too new and people didn't want to cut up their trucks at that point. You don't want to cut up a $50,000 truck that early. And we
Yeah.
did one of the first TBI fuel injection kits back in the late 90s. That didn't sell either because it's, a $1,500 item and gas was 99 cents a gallon. Nobody cared that they were getting 12 miles to the gallon back then. They said, I'll just bring a gas can. I'll save the 1,200 or 1,500. But it was basically a GM throttle body, but we built everything to make it work. The air cleaner adapters, knock sensors. We incorporated all instead of the abbreviated versions that you see on the market today, we had every sensor that GM had on a regular GM truck was on it. So it was a real smooth running thing. Nowadays they program out map sensors sometimes. Not maybe not the map sensor, but they program out the spark control module. They program out the knock sensor. It seems like everyone I've tried since then has a little glitch here and there. You'll run up to a stop at a stoplight and the engine will take a while to wind down, or every now and then it'll stall. They had glitches where we were just running a GM computer with a GM program, very little modifications because it was a 4.3 computer and a 4.2 engine, so it ran pretty good. But
Yeah.
we just elected to keep all these sensors because GM wanted them, so I figured they knew what they were doing. They had a bigger tech budget than I did. So
Yeah.
then, well, we started off with the Aussie grill guard and a rear tube bumper for the 40. And then I just kept calling them and saying, well, you want this, you want that. Built the shackle reversal kits and then the shackle reversal kits for the 60s. A lot of it was out of necessity. I had a 55 and I was in Moab and I got the only one that couldn't get up a ledge because I kept inverting my front shackles. So I got pissed off, went home and made a FJ60/55 shackle reversal kit because basically they have the same frame rails, they're just 3 inches narrower. So
Yeah.
it's real easy to do a steering box conversion on a 55 using a 60. Um, then one of the other items, the tire carriers, obviously the tire carriers became a big item for us. That was about 95. And then we started off with a double. We didn't actually start making a half carrier for probably another 10 years. There wasn't any interest in it back then. They were interested in the full carrier with the ice chest holder so they could carry more
Yeah.
junk out on the trails. Yeah. We had U-bolt flip kits. They were a necessity after we started doing the rock crawling and we got kicked out of an event for shearing the bottom of our U-bolts off. So it's back to the drawing board, turn that around, and yeah, we lost an event because of that. So you can't go anywhere when the springs aren't connected. We sheared off three on one side on one obstacle. Okay, this has got to change. So a lot of those things are just things I built because you get out on the trail and you see the weak spots.
Yeah. Um, and when I first got my 40, uh, there was a local, they say they're an off-roading club, but it was 90% Jeep vehicles.
Oh, okay.
There was a couple of Forerunners. There was a couple or built up Forerunners. There was I was the only Land Cruiser, and at the time I was stock wheels and tires. No, I had my wheels, But I was running on stock tires or stock size tires, stock size suspension, or stock height suspension, and they wanted to go out and do a night run. And uh, halfway through, sure enough, my leaf spring perch got hung up on a rock. And a guy that I work with, who has a Jeep, he's like, "Well, at least I made it through without getting high centered." I'm like, "I didn't get high centered. My leaf spring perch got hung up on a rock." And and then when I went to go do the what's
Yeah,
that?
the rear leaf spring perch. The rear,
Actually,
probably.
it was the front left.
The front light wired. Okay.
Um, it was a night run, and I didn't happen to see this rock, and my tire slipped off of it and hit the perch and got me hung up, and we had to put some rocks underneath the tire to get it lifted up more. And needless to say, I'm never going to do a night run again. I've done one. I don't need to ever do it. And my nerves were just so frayed at the end of the night. We ended up. It was supposed to be like a 2-hour ride, and it started at 7. I'm like, okay. I told my wife, I'm like, we'll be home by 9:30. It'll be good. 2 o'clock we get home. 2 o'clock in the morning we get home, and she's like, I'm never going in that truck again. And
Oh, you took
so, what's that?
you took her with. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I made the mistake of taking her with me
Yeah.
on this one. And the kids were all at grandma's house, and it was supposed to be, like I said, that because the information that I had is that it was an easier trail, and it's just a through trail from Oracle to Tucson or Oracle to Marana, and 2 hours, and it wasn't an easy trail, and yeah, it was a lot longer than I expected. But
Oracle,
when I went,
yeah, Oracle to Marana. I haven't wheeled that area too much. I've done the what's the famous one down there out near Oracle? The
Charlo Gap,
done a couple. What's that?
Charlo Gap.
Yeah, Charlotte Gap. I've done that one. That's what is that the one you're talking about?
No, it was. I don't even remember the name
Unknown.
of it anymore,
Yeah.
but it was. It went from well, basically Catalina, um, Saddlebrook over to Marana, and so
Okay.
um, yeah, that was just such a horrible experience. I had zero fun that trip. Normally I come out, I'm like, oh, that was a lot of fun. And after I finished that one, I'm like, I had no fun at all. It was not fun. But when I went to go do my lift kit, I saw where I'd hit the leaf spring perch, and I'm like, oh, I need to get one of Dave Gore's U-bolt flip kits, um, just to prevent that from happening again. And it was like the front lip of the perch that I got hung up on, and it
Okay.
kind of
Yeah.
it folded the perch underneath the bolt, and I'm like, oh. So I still have that on my to-do list to do the U-bolt flip kits. Now I do have this question about the U-bolt flip kits. How do you compensate for, like, on the on the passenger side, the right hand side? It's right next to the differential, so is there like a
It's like
gap or a
yeah, they're two different legs. It still
okay?
grabs that same welded on that little bracket that's welded on the side of your differential. Yeah, it grabs high and low. So technically you'll have an inch less travel on that side than the other side because the perch is sitting higher, so
Yeah.
yeah, if you're doing a lift, it's not a big deal. If you're running stock springs, stock height, all worn out springs, it's going to be kind of close. You'll be down to just an inch and a half, 2 inches of travel if it's a worn out old stock spring. But most people are doing lifts anymore. Um,
Yeah,
the
I
first
ended up
one was weird. Yeah, 40's kind of a weird truck when it comes to the lifts because it's got a lot of limitations unless you do a lot of work on it. If you go over 4 inches, you almost always have to do a cut and turn. Um, because, and then you always, because, and then you have to do longer shock towers. Um, Even at 4 inches of lift, you're not going to get the most out of a 4 inch lift because your shock towers are too short. And in your stock shock towers, if you say you got a 78, I'll just use the later models for example because it's a different set of shocks. The rear shock is a couple inches longer than the front shock, but when you put on a tower, slightly longer tower, you can use those longer shocks up front, which will give you more travel. You'll go from like, you know, it just adds 2 inches of wheel travel. And when you're doing a 4 inch lift, um, the distance from your shock tower down to the axle, um, if you use one that um, won't blow up under compression, like it's short enough to compress all the way, then when it's extended and when you're setting static, you only got about a half inch of droop
Yeah.
because so you have to go to a longer tower. You got issues with the caster on the 40s because they're set up with, if you look at the pinion to knuckle relationship, it's almost like a zero to 1 degree caster. So most people, when they're doing like a cut and turn, they'll match what the 60 has. The 60 has about 6 degrees of differential between, so your pinion's up a little and while you're laying on your spring. So, everything with a 40 is kind of a happy medium when you start lifting it beyond 2.5 inches. And you should really droop a truck once you put a lift on it and whatever shocks you should droop it all the way down because the U joints on a 40 have, they only have 24 to 27 degrees of articulation. And a
Yeah.
lot of guys that used to do spring overs and stuff would bust their pinion because they'd get a lot of droop and then they'd lock up that U joint while it's under power and then they just snap the pinion off. So you can use like an 80 U joint off the front of an 80. It's got a 45-degree articulation, and most of the good shops like Cruiser Outfitters and George and Gary at Mudrack, they're all selling an 80 slip yoke assembly that gives you, not only does it go from 2 3/4 inches of slip length, it goes to an 8 inch slip length. So you got a lot more travel with the drive shaft, and it's got
Yeah.
a 45-degree U joint on it. So anybody getting into, serious four wheeling, and especially if you're four wheeling alone. I do all my four wheeling alone most of the time because I never know when I have time. So I hate to break and then walk home,
Yeah.
especially if I'm in Utah. It's a long walk.
Yeah. I ended up doing a 2.5 inch pro comp lift.
Okay,
Um,
that's a safe.
so
That's a safe. Yeah.
so not a lot of lift, but it was a lot more lift than the 50-year-old sagging leaf
Sure.
springs. Um, I can't go any higher than 2.5 inches because I can't get into my garage afterwards if I do that.
Yeah, I had a customer that we put a 4 inch lift on, and he had to put two little 1,000-pound winches mounted to the frame to his axle so he could suck the thing down on the springs and go under the door and then release his winches.
Yeah.
That's an old rock crawling trick. They used to put a little winch up front because when you climb, you get a weight transfer. So if you're climbing a really steep angle, if you suck down the front end, you can sit there and claw at a steep angle, suck down the front end and walk right up it because you get such a
Okay.
weight transfer. And then when you unload the springs because you're pointing straight up, it's even worse. So they suck that thing right down to the bump stops and climb things that you normally wouldn't be able to climb. So it's kind of amazing. We had a couple of years we had a 40 in the rock crawling where we had hydraulics on all four corners.
Okay.
And it was fun for the spectators because we could high center on a boulder and I was spotting I could have Don lift one tire way up they had 16 inches of travel in these hydraulics, lift one tire up, I could roll a boulder under, and he could push down with that tire and lift it off the high center and drive. And when we were in Montrose, there was a side hill that only 3 vehicles really made it past. We were one of them because we sucked one side down and elevated the other side. Um, the only one that cruised through that was Sniper, but he was on deuce and half axles, so he was wide as,
Okay.
you can't, he couldn't roll that thing. It was a lightweight buggy on deuce and half axles. The axles weighed more than the rest of the truck, so it was like almost impossible. Plus, they were running sand inside the tires, which made it even heavier. A lot of the guys would just start filling their tires. I guess the farmers use some kind of, uh, it's a sodium. They fill their tires with it's not a sand, it's a sodium something, and it makes the tires really heavy, gives them more traction. You can't roll on a side hill if your tire weighs 500 pounds. It just doesn't go anywhere. So yeah, they were a lot of fun. The hydraulic
Mm.
stuff was a lot of fun. So
Um, so are you still building buggies or are you just selling parts now?
I've got a few. I've got 60 and a few 40s in the. We don't do buggies much. We're doing 40s mainly.
Okay.
40s and 60s. Um, every now and then. We don't have a lot of people. In January. I lost um, one of my fabricators. He died. He was a young kid, but he'd been with me since he was 14. Um, so, and right now it's just 2 people. James and I are the only two in the shop right now. It's really hard to find somebody that wants to do this anymore, much less in a town of a few thousand people.
Yeah.
You almost got to be in the valley. Even in the valley, when you talk to people, finding younger people that really want to work on trucks like this, it's not the same as it was in the 90s and in 2000s. It just started waning off. They're just not. It's easier to try to get a tech job, I guess. It's less dirty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Um, a
yeah.
couple of years ago.
The mine gets a lot of any of the welders and the fabricators end up going to the mines. The mines have, they'll be around their whole lifetime, and I'll be 70 soon, so they're looking at me and going, "Well, how long will I have a job? You'll be dead soon."
It's kind of interesting. A couple of years ago, I took my son on a relic run up, and we did uh, Montana Mountain, and then after the relic run, we were going to go camp out at Lake Roosevelt, or Roosevelt Lake, however you say it. And
Sure.
we go into to Globe and go over to Roosevelt, because you're in Globe, right? Or are you in Miami?
Miami, Miami. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, so we went into to Globe and over to Roosevelt, and then when we were coming home, I'm like, you know what? Almost like a straight shot from here down to Tucson, but I was just looking at like my GPS and it didn't show the topography. And so I'm trying to get my 3-speed 40 up and over the hills to out of Globe to get down into Tucson. I'm like, oh man. I'm like, it would have been more fuel efficient to go out and around through Superior and then drop down into Tucson through Florence. But
Yeah.
my son who I took on that relic run, he's a junior in high school now, and we just got him a second gen Forerunner, and he's like, I don't want to go to school. He's learning welding, he's learning automotive right now, um, and the mines are actually already starting to recruit. I don't know if that's the right word, but he's like, yeah, I might be a technician at the mine. I'm like, if you get on as an apprentice somewhere, you're at the right age, and a lot of people are kind of at the age where they're trying to figure out to get out, and you're trying to figure out a way to get in. That might be a good time to be like uh, a machine shop apprentice or something, because that's also a dying.
Yeah, the mines are a good place for younger people to have the energy. And most of the older guys don't want to work overtime. So if they want to work, they can get the hours. One of my guys left to the mines about 3 or 4 years ago, and I don't know. I think the first year he brought in 75,000 or something. And since then he gets raised. They give you a raise every year, whether you're better or worse. It doesn't matter. It's like all the other kind of union like jobs. You can be the worst guy on the list, but hey, but you got seniority, you get the raise. Um, he's he's kind of critical and picky after working here, and then he gets into the mines, and nobody has the same concern for quality. You know,
Yeah.
they're just they're a little bit more corporate, put it that way. Just get it done. Don't give us more work than we have to do. He'll go around and look for things that are wrong and try to fix them, and he gets he pisses off the other employees. You're just making more work for us. So,
Yeah.
but other than
Um,
that, as
so
where he wants to go, where he's best going if he goes into welding, is trying to get on with the companies that are putting that are like the contractors and don't work for the mine in general, work for the contractors, especially the learning gas line and stuff like that. Um, Rob's nephew, he got on with TSM when they were doing the semiconductor plant, but he was only a maintenance guy and they were short of welders. So I said, you need to learn how to weld. And
yeah,
I think he's making six figures now.
nice.
And because he's a contractor, and when you start looking, and he goes on the road, right? You know, he's out of state, he's working gas pipelines in New Mexico, then in Nevada. And when they do that, they get the per diem. And the per diem is
Yeah,
175 to 180 a day. That's non-taxable wages on top of your salary. And
yeah,
as long as you spend it, like go out and buy yourself a brand new Dodge truck and a welder for it and a trailer to pull behind, it's entirely tax deductible. The per diem is. And most of it's tax deductible anyway because you have meals. And so you'll have somebody making $45 an hour plus 175 a day per diem,
nice.
which is pretty good money for a 20. That kid's 22 this year, and
Oh
you
man,
know
that's good money
his
for a
parents are
22-year-old.
yeah, he's making more money than his parents. Yeah, no, there and you see a lot of the ones around here. He can get if he works if he lives someplace and they take him on, say he lives in Tucson and he has to come up to Globe to work, he'll get that same per diem. Um, uh, Another kid that worked for me works for the mines now, and he'll have to work in Baghdad. And when he goes to Baghdad, it's $178 a day per diem. And his brother lives in the area. He just crashes there and keeps the per diem, you
Yeah,
know,
and
on top of the wages. And a lot of times the per diem's worth more than the salary by the time you factor in the no taxes.
yeah.
You start getting into that.
Um, and for those listening, because when I first moved to Arizona, I had no idea about some of the names. It's Miami, Arizona, not Miami, Florida, and it's Baghdad, Arizona, not Baghdad, Iraq. So I when I first moved down here, I'm like, Baghdad, who's going to Bag? And that was like right at the beginning of the Gulf War and everything, and so it was like, oh, there's a Baghdad, Arizona. Okay, I get.
I think they have
So
the same climate and the same scenery too. It's it's kind of it's a, there's not a lot there. Not a lot
yeah,
of country clubs and resorts in Baghdad. It's got a lot of dirt, a lot of rock, a lot of bored people. Most of them will try to go live in the Prescott area and just drive up there. There's a pretty direct road that goes to Baghdad. So if you
yeah,
want any nightlife, you're going to want to go to, live in Prescott and make the
yeah,
commute every day to Baghdad.
yeah.
They do a lot of rock crawling. They're doing a lot of the rock crawling stuff there now, though. The Wee Rock is
Okay,
in Baghdad, a lot of it. So
okay. So how many Land Cruisers have you had in your history?
I don't know if I can count that high. I drove the 40 The first 40 I drove for 20 years. Then I rolled it backwards down a mountain 6 times. Then I took the cowl off that and put it into the rock crawler that we ran. I transferred the motor to an FJ55. Um, and I've had two or three 60s. I had an 80 for a little while. And now I've got a 60 and a 40 on a first gen Tundra and a couple Dodges. Those are the work trucks. I've got a Trooper that is pretty built up, and the 60 though I'm just finishing up after a full frame up again, and the 40 is a frame up, and they're both kind of a little extreme. Neither one's a the super comfortable street driver, I guess. Dual transfers, 35s. It's lots of armor on them and lots of gearing. The 60, I was driving around yesterday, but I still want to detail a few things on it. And I have airbags in the back of it for when I load it down. I just finished wiring airbags into it yesterday. At least wiring in the gauges and stuff up front so I can see what's going on. The 40, I've got more time on that. That one's a throttle body V8 with a NV40, I'm sorry, a SM45 465 transmission, and it has double transfer cases. And both of them have ARBs and 488s. I've had the same ARB since the 90s. I just keep moving them from one truck to the other. I mean, back in the late 90s, an ARB was just a little over $400 for the air locker. But, your Aussie dollar was like 70 cents and less inflation back then. Most of the things were pretty cheap back then. You get an ARB ice chest for $400 too, and that was an Ingles. So I had a couple of those. I ran those continuous, those Ingles ice chests for one lasted 21 years and one lasted 23 years, never unplugged. If it wasn't in the truck, it was in the shop, keeping drinks cold. Long-lasting ice chests. Now I'm experimenting with four others. I've got a Snowmaster, I've got an Iceco, I've got a Dometic, and an ARB Zero. Trying to see which one can last as long as an angle. Mostly
It, it,
there's always two in the shop.
yeah, it's going to be hard for anything to last as long as that angle did. Just because we've almost become a disposable society where
True.
new vehicles now are lasting 5, maybe 10 years. And then there's those crazy people like us who are like, 55-year-old vehicle? No problem. I'm going to keep that thing running. I'm going to hand it down generation to generation. And uh, I give the same argument to the guy who I work with who came with me on that night run.
Yeah.
He's always like, "Oh, your Land Cruiser broke down." Back when I locked up the motor, I had Justin Robbins from Redline up in Colorado help me get that sorted out. Um, we had to do it kind of remotely because my engine was down here, the machine shop was down here. He was up there. He would kind of walk me through getting it rebuilt. But this guy at work, he drives a Jeep, and he's always like, "Oh, your Land Cruiser's broken down." I'm like, "My Land Cruiser's 56 years old. Your Jeep's not going to be around in 56 years." So, uh, and I'm
I was
always
just at
giving.
Justin.
What's that?
I said I was just at Justin's in January. Went up to his shop. There to
I
drop off bumpers for one of his customers.
haven't met him in person, but I would like to meet him in person. I've had him on the podcast, and that's when he started being like so you locked up your motor. How did it happen? And he's like, yep, that'll do it. Um, so do you just use your Land Cruisers as buggies, or do you like go overlanding or camping in them?
Oh yeah, it's camping. No, every vehicle I have is for camping, four wheeling. I don't have a two wheel drive. I've never actually. No, I take that back. I've got one. I've got a Dodge flatbed that I use for picking up steel, and that's the very first truck I've ever owned that was two wheel drive. I've all I've ever had is four wheel drives. Well, dirt bikes. I guess they don't. I had I had street bikes, so But
Yeah.
as far as cars, I've had Land Cruisers and a Tundra. I've had Toyota 84 Toyota truck long ago, and I have the Trooper. I've had, but the Trooper is built like the Land Cruiser. The only thing is, it's not as everything on the Trooper actually is smaller than the 60, but it outweighs it by 400 pounds, and it's got a lighter motor because it's just built like a brick shit house. I think they took the all the parts off their 5 tons and made a little car out of it. You start looking under there, and there'll be a bracket over um, the fuel filter that's made out of 1/8 inch plate, and just totally surrounds. Everything is just really well built, and plus it's still running, even though it's independent. It's like the older Toyotas where you had inner and outer taper bearings, whereas all the new stuff has unit bearings, and
Yeah.
kind of ball joints are. I mean, I have a Tundra, and I'm more confident really with the front end of the Trooper than I am with the Tundra, um,
Okay.
because I got a first gen Tundra. I've already had a ball joint fail. Luckily, it was in the parking lot of an O'Reilly's, but when that fails, you're you're dragging it up on a flatbed tow vehicle. I mean, it just drops right to the ground. It's rough, um, and they tell you just to be safe, new ball joints every 150,000 miles. Whereas you start looking at that's just when like a Land Cruiser's front end is getting broken in. You know the dual tapers. Um, I kind of I drive these other vehicles, but you're never as confident as you are with the old Land Cruisers. I have
Yeah.
no problem going on a 200 miles to the nowhere in Utah in a Land Cruiser, but when you're driving some of the independent front end stuff, you're always listening for something. Oh, did I hear a snap or a crackle or a pop? Um, I just feel more confident about the old school stuff. Solid axles. I like solid axles. I like
Yeah.
I like the true inner outer taper bearing stuff. Even some of the old vehicles, the drum brake vehicles, they would break a spindle every now and then, but the spindle is it's much smaller on the drum brake than it is on the disc brake. The disc brake had a spindle pretty comparable to a Dana 60. Your drum brake was more like a Dana 30. It was a small spindle, small diameter. And I've had to go out on rescue missions in north of Phoenix about 4 times
Yeah.
in the last, 30, 40 years. It's not often, but, most people don't call me, they just call it a tow truck. But people know, say, hey, you have a spindle? I broke it on the trail. I've never had to rescue somebody with a disc brake spindle broken, but I have had to do. It's kind of like it's one of those things. Those and Burfields, you know, Harry
Yeah.
Burfields. I broke more Burfields than I can remember. So running
Yeah.
the RTMs now and see how they work. So
My
RCMs are
my
sweet.
my first experience with a four wheel drive is actually uh, we had a Volkswagen van again, and never again in my life will I ever even contemplate a Volkswagen van again. The starter was going out on it, and so we had 4 kids in our family, and my dad, it was a manual transmission, and everyone, whenever we would stop somewhere, it wouldn't start up, and so all 4 kids would get out and push the van again, my dad would pop the clutch and I'll run and jump back in the van again and slide the door shut. And when that finally went out, my dad's like, you know what? I'm gonna get an Isuzu Trooper, because he was starting to get into ski patrol at the time up in Idaho, and he needed something that would be better and easier to handle snow. And so we got the Isuzu Trooper, and I'm the youngest of the four kids in my family, and so my mom and dad would sit in the front seats, and my three siblings would sit in the bench seat, and I was always relegated to the back, and I'd have to get into the back door. But as I started getting my license, or when I got my license, we still had it, and my parents would go out of town for a weekend, and they'd be like, "Here's 40." And again, this is 95, 96, so $40 went a long way for a weekend for a teenager. They're like, "Here's $40 for food, uh, no parties." And I'm like, "Well, I'm not going to have people over anyway. I'm too shy." Believe it or not, I have a podcast, but I'm too shy. Um, but my friends and I, we'd go out and we'd go wheeling in my Isuzu Trooper. Um, and then my next older brother crashed it one winter, and my dad bought a Mazda pickup, 4-wheel drive. And then I was actually out with my dad, and we were going down this dirt road in Idaho. We're gonna go do some shooting, and it was really undulating and rutted and washed out. And I'm kind of looking over the hood and looking over the steering wheel and looking out the window and kind of self-spotting. And my dad's like, "You look way too comfortable to be doing this." I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, "When do you go off-roading?" I'm like, I plead the fifth. And then later on, I told him, I'm like, every time you guys would leave for a Friday night into Saturday or a weekend, I was out off-roading every time. And my dad's like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, I would just go out and drive closer to the mountains. If I see a dirt road, I'd turn off and I'd just go off-roading until I got to the end of the dirt road or back to pavement. And so, yeah, and a little after I had graduated for a while, I think it was about a year and a half after I graduated from high school, a former foreign exchange student that lived at our house, he parked his Isuzu Trooper there for a while. He was from Japan, and I would take his Isuzu Trooper. I'm like, oh, I need to make sure that the 4-wheel drive still works. And I would always go out in his Isuzu Trooper. And yeah, so that's how I kind of cut my teeth in 4-wheel drives. It's not the first 4-wheel drive I was ever in, but it's the first time driving a 4-wheel drive. And so, yeah, and now I all I drive is my Land Cruiser. Occasionally, I'll drive my son's 4Runner now, and that's 4-wheel drive. So, yeah.
I think all teenagers took their parents' cars out four-wheeling at least once. My dad didn't have he had a Bronco for a short time, but I did the same thing with his Renault. He had a Renault. He used to like those French cars. He had a Citroen and a Renault,
Oh
and the
man.
Citroen would raise up and down, so you got a lot of ground clearance. But yeah, it's amazing how far a teenager can take a two-wheel drive. If you go fast enough. Yeah, we used to go out. I lived quite a ways out of town, North Phoenix, and we went out rattlesnake hunting every every chance we got, and just driving around the desert. I mean, the whole area when I was um, a teenager, making money to buy my dirt bike, I was catching rattlesnakes and scorpions for the Venom Lab at ASU.
Oh yeah.
They don't know that because we're 14-year-olds, but we knew one of my friend's neighbors was a herpetologist at the ASU, and so we would go out and hunt down rattlesnakes, load them up in gunny sacks, and we're on stingrays, bicycles, because we're 14, driving around the desert. And I think our best day was 6 rattlesnakes. And back then we would get $10, $15 a rattlesnake. So you're 14. This is 1973. So, that was good money for a 14-year-old. Scorpions, they would give us 25 cents, 50 cents, depending on how short they were on scorpions. And the venom labs were doing the research with them. And then that guy moved away, so had to get a real job.
Yeah.
So I think I was
You
picking
know,
grapes.
it's amazing how inventive young boys uh, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s were about making money, rattlesnake farming, scorpion farming, whatever. Uh, every week, or not every week, every year during the summer, me and a cousin would go up to my grandparents' house to and they lived in this really, really small town in Idaho, but they lived off of a golf course, and the golf course was off of a lake, and their house was like picturesque, and it had a big picture window looking over the golf course, looking over the lake, and there was some neighbor kids who they had sons about my age, and we'd go up there and hang out, and we would just run amok for a week. And my grandma would be like, "Okay, lunch is going to be at this time. Be here or not." And we'd be running around like, "Oh, it's almost lunchtime," and hop back on our mountain bikes and get home, and then she'd be like, "Okay, dinner's at this time. Be here or not. If you're not here, you're not getting any." And so we'd always have to make sure that we get back. But in the times that we weren't back at my grandparents' house, go to the we go to like the IGA, and they'd have like goggles or snorkels and stuff like that. And so we would go to the the pro shop and say, "Hey, we're gonna go out on the lake by the golf course and look for golf balls." And they're like, "Okay, but you got to bring all the golf balls back to us, and we'll buy them off of you for 75 cents or for 25 cents." And they would wash them and turn them around and sell them for
Sure.
$1 or 75
Yep.
cents. And so we would actually sell them to the golfers for 50 cents. So we were actually making money. And then once we would get enough
Sure.
money, we'd go back down to the IGA and buy like little toy uh, potato. They were potato guns, but not like the big ones where you shove a potato down the PVC pipe and then spray hairspray down there and shove it down a potato down the PVC pipe and launch the potato like half a mile or whatever. There's these little tiny plastic ones that you stick them in a potato, and it just gets a little tiny bit, and you pull the trigger and it pops it out. But these friends that we had, their dad was the sheriff of the county that we lived in, and my cousin and I, who were the same age, we were up there, and we could almost just walk right into our friend's house because they were like second family to us. But we'd use all that money from hunting golf balls to go buy these little potato guns, and then we'd have wars. But my cousin and I were inside our friend's house, and we heard somebody coming up the driveway, and so we were going to ambush my friend, thinking that it was him coming in. And my cousin jumps around he hears the door open, and he jumps around the corner. He's got this little tiny potato gun that shoots little chunks of potato out of it. And there's my friend's dad holding a 12 gauge shotgun in one hand and an M4 in the other hand. And my cousin go out and have fun.
So it was a tater tot thing.
Yeah.
They're still doing that at all the golf courses too. They're still doing that.
Yeah.
I mean, I know Bel Air Golf Course in New Phoenix. Um, when my friends were, two friends of mine were lifeguards there, so we would collect the golf balls out there. I had scuba gear
Yeah.
because we used to scuba dive. So I went down once, but I didn't like the lake.
Yeah.
It was muddy. You couldn't see anywhere, and all you would do is root around the bottom. So I gave up on that quick because it was a muddy, dirty lake at Bel Air Golf Course. It was more fun to scuba
Yeah.
dive down in Mexico. Um, our family, my mom and dad were big
Yeah.
into scuba, and so they used to drag us down to
Yeah.
Juarez every year. And
So,
I
what's
don't
been
know,
like one of your
last year we
fondest
went to
memories in your?
Cancun.
I mean, you've shared some great memories,
So
but what's been another good memory that
now
you've
it's St.
had in your
James.
Land
I don't think
Cruisers
I
over
want
the
to go down
years?
there right now. Baja is fun, but gotta be careful. Oh, we used to go out twice a week. When I was in my 20s, friends, we were out when I was working at kind of a
Yeah.
normal job. It was every Thursday and every Sunday, so all over the Bradshaws, all over. I didn't do Southern Arizona much. It was always mostly everywhere north of Phoenix. Well, in Globe area, and we cut.
Yeah.
You know, I'd say during the 90s when everything kind of changed. In the beginning, you're doing like four wheeling based on the equipment
Yeah.
available. There wasn't a lot of it. You couldn't really build. It was really hard to build up a really able truck with what was available in the market, in the late 70s. You're talking like, a big tire was a 33, like a maxi track, true tracks. And then the bigger tires came late. In fact, the guy that when I first got my Land Cruiser, um, had a friend, well, a guy that I used to buy parts from. His name was Earl Colton, and he owned statewide four-wheel drive. He passed recently, but he made money by welding rims together because back in the 70s, it was,
Yeah.
before he was doing that back in the early 70s where you wanted to run a tire bigger than a 31, you had to use an implement tire. Because it was probably the late 70s before 30s and 8-inch wide rims and stuff became really popular. Might have been the mid 70s, but Earl was running probably the 60s is more like it when he was welding the rims together because they were running at the bottom of what is now Lake Powell. So he was four wheeling down there, one of the first groups through the 60s, and then we built the dam and Lake Powell got flooded.
Yeah.
That killed a lot of his playground. But I remember one of the reasons I started getting into this was because there was just nothing available. You know, no good bumpers, no good no really cool looking parts, and I bought my tubing bender that I still use today in 1980. Still using it today, building cages and bumpers. It's a Hausfeld, and um,
Okay.
for in the beginning it was all stick welding, and then got MIG welders in
Nice.
1990. But I love all the wheeling around southern Utah, Colorado. Um, One of the first trips I made to Colorado was Stony Pass, and that was in 1980. And we went over the whole pass from Durango to Pagosa Spring, coming out at Creed. Um, we saw one guy. It was a cowboy on horseback. Now you're fighting crowds. I've been over the Alpine Loop when you could go for a 3-day adventure and pass one or two trucks, and that's it. And last time I went
Yeah.
there, I was out there. I think they were running the Solid Axle Summit. I just happened to be passing through, and I tried to find some of the. I knew they were out there, so came back from Gunnison, went down, cut across, what's that, Lake City or whatever they call that, and it was just nonstop traffic, side by sides, hundreds of them. I got a traffic jam coming down into Silverton, just waiting for people to get over a rock, the half the size of a bowling ball, with spotters and a lot of people, a lot of inexperienced drivers out there. Yeah, some of you could drive over at 30 miles an hour and they're all lining up spotters and pointing this way and that way, and a lot of side by sides out there. But I miss that. I've kind of transitioned to Utah because there's less traffic there right now. And um, last summer I spent 2 weeks out of every month working with the Forest Service because their budget got cut and nothing got settled as far as pay, so they had to lay off their rec crew, and then the rest of the crew was down fighting the Grand Canyon fire. So basically, I went out there in Escalante. They gave me one of their cabins up in the mountains, about 25 miles out of town, and a Forest Service truck, and I just serviced 4 campgrounds: Blue Spruce, Posey, um, Pine Lake, and Barker Reservoir. Beautiful. So I was in heaven, just 2 weeks at a time, and then come back for 2 weeks, fill out orders, get them out. Because last summer was kind of
Yeah,
slow for
it
parks.
is.
So was the fall. So I took advantage of that and just spent a lot of time up in Utah. And then, cruising the back roads, learning the roads. It's beautiful country up there, the Utah stuff. And there's some, you have the Devil's Backbone up there, which is a really cool road to take. And then you got the roads, the dirt roads that go between Escalante down to Powell. You can take 75 miles of
Yeah,
dirt road, get down to Powell, take another road, goes over Boulder and comes out at the ferries at Bullfrog. I mean, there's
yeah,
hundreds and hundreds of miles of dirt roads, and just keep going on forever. And next time I go up there, I'll spend more time north,
yeah,
around Hanksville and up. You just can't spend enough time there. And probably what I'll be doing after I retire from
yeah.
this is spend most of my time out on the road. I could I could easily spend 25 days out of 30 doing that. It wouldn't bother me at all. Just load up. I've got a lot of stuff that lets me stay self-sufficient, hot water showers, a variety of different tents depending on the climate, sleeping gear. I've got a mobile water purifier. I can run 3 gallons a minute of crystal bottled water out of a creek, So I'm set there, built that. It's a
Yeah.
4 filter setup for reverse osmosis. Um, Lots of batteries,
So,
lots of lithium batteries, lots of solar
yeah.
panels.
So,
Set up camp and
one thing
stay
about
for a
these
few
old Land
days, move,
Cruisers
stay for a few
is
days.
they are the
Don't have to
exact
smell bad
opposite of
in the
what
showers.
people say a good
So yeah, I can do
vehicle
that and
should
not
be
smell.
now. They're slower, they're loud, they don't have all the modern amenities, but us cruiser heads absolutely love them. Why do you think we love them so much? Okay.
Well, I make mine faster, so I'm guilty of that. Um, I'll keep a 6 cylinder until it blows up. I almost never rebuild them. I'll always do a V8 swap. Um, and that's because it's cheaper for me because I do the work. The last 2F I rebuilt, I had the machine shop do the short block, and it lasted 17,000 miles and broke a rod. And the short block I had almost $4,000 into the rebuild. And back then, before COVID,
Yeah.
you could buy a brand new throttle body V8, the long block or a Vortec motor with roller rockers. You could buy for $2,400, and it came with a 100,000 mile warranty from GM. So spending 4,000 on a short block and then having 125 horsepower and I got better gas mileage. When I had the first V8, I did my first V8 swap in 1980, because I was up
Okay.
living in Washington and I was doing logging in Forks. I just had a friend up there and I said, hey, I want to go do logging. I want to see Washington. And it was on the peninsula, the Olympic Peninsula, and it was 80 or 81. It was right after St. Helens blew, so there was all this lumber up there they had to cut up. And I parked my truck. I'd just done a full oil change with Amsoil because it was the cool guy stuff in the 2F. And I went to a grocery store. It was a Roger's grocery store. And no problem. I drove back, and on the way back, the motor seized. And I looked, my drain plug was gone. There wasn't a drop of oil in my truck. Somebody had stole the Amsoil. And it's my fault because I had
Yeah.
an Amsoil sticker on the window. And that stuff like was $5 a quart back then. And that's kind of like putting the Fosgate sticker on the back of your car and waiting for the car thief or the stereo thief to into your car. Oh, he's got a Fosgate in there, or he's got a good stereo. Let's see what's inside there. Yeah, there wasn't. It was drained. Went back the next day. There was no oil on the ground, so it seized the motor, and I got back to. I was coming back to Arizona anyway, so I rebuilt the motor up there, just the bottom end. I just had to go through the bottom end, and I did that in a dirt parking lot, and got it back. And then I got home and I said I want to do a V8 swap, and I did the V8 swap, and I got more horsepower, same gas mileage. And then in '90, when they came out with fuel injection, I swapped to I had a Chevy
Nice.
truck I found at a yard that had 8,000 miles on it, got in a collision. So I took the throttle body V8 out, and the I jumped. I was getting 16 to 18 miles to the gallon with that motor, and it was just I, maybe. Um, yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
the 18 miles to the gallon. I could tow a trailer with two dirt bikes in it to Moab and still get 16 miles to the gallon. And then that's only a 200 horse V8. When you start going into I'll be testing out a new V8 in the 60, but it's got a sniper on it, and I have a feeling that's probably only going to get 14, somewhere in that range. But I never got that good with
Yeah.
the 2F. So now once you threw a lift on it in 33s or 34s, it's kind of like my Tundra. I was getting 18 miles to the gallon with that first gen Tundra. I threw 35s on it and a lift kit, and now I get 14. So it's whenever you lift them and whenever you put tires on them, you
Yeah.
get a drop in mileage. Well, it doesn't help that I put front rear bumpers and sliders and a camper shell on it, so I increased the rate and a winch. So I've got another 800 pounds of junk on it, and the 60 is the same way. I think my 60 weighs in about 6,500 pounds by the time it's done because I got
Yeah.
a 25-gallon water tank, a 39-gallon gas tank. I've got sliders, front bumper, roof rack, rear bumper, and so I've
Yeah.
I've got a couple thousand pounds on it when you fill it
And
up.
hotels get expensive
So,
now, so
but, it's what you need. If you're gonna go out, if you're
um,
gonna go out in the middle of nowhere, you need all that stuff. Unless it's a hotel.
yeah.
Yep, they are
Yeah.
now. I, it's not like the old days when Motel 6 was $6 and Super 8 was $8. That's what they were in the 70s. That's why they called them Motel 6 and Super 8. I went fresh junior year of high school. My sister went off to the army, and me and a friend jumped in her Volkswagen Bug and went from San Diego to Canada, and stopped at Canada, went up to the peninsula and back around through Glacier and down through Yellowstone. And we were in a
Yeah.
Volkswagen Bug, and gas was less than 60 cents a gallon. I took out for
Yeah.
$500 and came back with
Just a
200,
little bit.
but every
Well,
hotel
we're
was
over an hour. Do you have any final thoughts
$5
for
to
us?
$10 back then. That was a 76, 75. Mm, those went up. It's a little higher now. A little bit more. Um, no, not unless you have questions. Um, it's walking over to get that one. Yeah, sorry. Somebody came in looking for a key.
Okay.
A Dodge.
Um,
No, I don't know. It's I'll be around for anybody has questions. They can always call me. I end up talking to a lot of people on the phone about their builds. I'm okay with
so
that.
this isn't anything new to you. I mean, the video call,
Any kind of recommendation they
the
need
hour
help
conversations.
fixing up their trucks. I don't mind answering questions. I get in a lot of hour-long conversations on the phone. No, this is this is this
Yeah.
is new. I've never done a video call before. In fact, I wouldn't be able to do this if I hadn't gone out and bought this tablet, which I'm going to use
I
for all
actually,
trails in Onyx.
I was
This
filling up
is
my
I bought it
son's
was for all
Forerunner the
trails in
other
Onyx,
day,
and because
and at the
well,
gas
my
pump there
age,
was
my
an
eyes
ad
don't work
for
on
Onyx
cell
Off Road,
phones. I
and it
look at a
actually had
flat
an 80
on my
series
shoulder.
Land Cruiser on the ad. So I'm like,
Blind.
nice.
I need
Took
a
a
bigger
picture of it,
screen.
shared it to I Hate Mud and everything. So, um, well, Dave,
Maybe maybe that's White Dog. There's a guy down there in Tucson that runs a YouTube channel,
if it's a
and he
red
talks
80,
about
it might be him. I'd have
White
to
Dog
find him and
Overland or something.
talk to him
He had
about
a
it.
Tundra
So,
for a while, but now he's on a Navy.
um,
Maybe it's the
well,
same guy.
Dave, thank you for
He's
taking
sponsored
time
by
out of your
Onyx.
day, and I'm glad that we could get
So
this taken care of, and glad that I could finally get to talk to you.
yep, I'll be here most of the time. Taking off to Colorado next week, but after that I'll be back. Got to help a friend set up
Yeah,
a cutting table, and accidentally drive through Colorado on the way and stop here and there and get some camping in
yeah,
at the same time.
and sometimes that
Sometimes
excuse is
you
just,
need an excuse to go
hey,
somewhere.
I need to get away.
Anytime
That's a good enough
you're not in
excuse. So,
Colorado or Utah or Idaho or Montana, got to twist my arm.
yeah, it was good talking to you. I I will. We'll talk to you later.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good talking to you. If you need if you need a round two, let me know. Okay. Bye.